are you thinking of everything possible if this was to work?
Biggest advice that Dame Dash ever gave me, he said, stop calling your show a podcast. That was 2 years ago.
Sometimes it's not so much your idea, your business, or even the talent that you have. It's just the position of the market that you've cornered yourself into.
The reason why podcasts don't grow, no matter what you do, is because ultimately what happens is there's no virality built into it.
Do not do audio only unless you have a strong following and they will go find your audio based off your influence.
You're nothing but a marketer of a poison, and your target has been young people.
Fact checks never goes viral as much as the lie. What's poppin', what's poppin', what's poppin'? Welcome, Nicky and Moose. I'm Nicky. That's Moose. What's up, Moose?
What up, y'all?
And on this episode, if you're in the phase of rebuilding your brand or your business, Moose drops some fire tips that you can't miss. Of course, we're going to be talking about the latest docu-series on Netflix, Big Vape. What is our reaction to it? Podcasting 101. Okay, you've been asking about it. We got the how to grow your podcast, how to start your podcast from some of the top entrepreneurs out there. And then we have a new question of the week. Moose, how are you feeling about this episode?
Hey, well-balanced episode. Y'all got to check this one out.
Let's get into this intro.
2 kids from Queens, cut from a different cloth. Now joining forces, helping you to elevate your personal brand. Yeah, I'm talking about Nicky and Moose, bringing you a never-before-seen perspective into the mindset, the mentality, the behaviors, the driving force. But more importantly, the stories behind the people and brands that you know and love the most.
And of course, this episode is powered by Ecamm Live, the #1 all-in-one streaming platform that not only allows you to stream on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, all the social media platforms, but it's also amazing for pre-recorded videos, like for courses, like for trainings. You could do great things for your Zoom calls and Google Meets. So we're giving 14 days away on us if you go to www.nickyandmoose.com/ecamm. That's ECAMM, I believe. Yep. For that 14-day trial. 2 M's. Moose, how are we feeling?
M's. Man, I'm feeling pretty good. It's been a good week, and I'm no longer feeling a little bit under the weather, because I know when we did the live earlier, I was like, I might be on my way out, but we bounced back and I feel good. So it's been solid, man. I feel good. Got a trip coming up, so we're traveling here in a little bit. Looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a nice little, not so much a vacation or a getaway run, but definitely a work trip. But it's just an exciting because it's something brand new or whatnot. So I'm excited to get going.
Is it a new state? Is it
No, going to my second favorite home, Michigan. And I know that's crazy this time of the year because it's not necessarily the most pleasant weather. It's not like it's a warm weather state, but I do love Michigan, man. Yeah. I do love Michigan. I think they said it's dipping near the 40s or something like that. Where is it at by you in Virginia now? Are you still
we're still in 70s.
Decent?
Yeah, we're still in 70s.
Wow. You know, New York this time of the year is what they call like the you experience the whole year in one day. So it's super cold in the morning or somewhat cold in the morning, super hot in the afternoon, then it dips into fall, and then sure enough, it gets pretty cold at night. So yeah, the weather this time of the year in New York is complicated. If it was a relationship status, it would just be that. It's complicated. We don't know what's going on yet. Yeah, man. But I do want to share, one of my big realizations this week, or my big lessons, is this idea that when development happens, and this is not just exclusively for entrepreneurs. I believe that this could be for even professionals working at organizations, companies, or anything in between, that your best ideas sometimes don't come from you or from even people on your team who are super close to the project or the thing that you're working on. Because I have been so big the last really 6 months or so on the cycle, the business phases, or the development phases that happen inside of a business. And the one that I have been most dedicated to is the rebuild process, because the rebuild process is one where you've learned all of the lessons, you have seen great growth, you've also seen big decline, and now you're strong enough to build yourself back up without having to repeat some of the mistakes that you've made early on. So there's a lot less emotion involved. There's a lot less ego involved. You're strictly working off of what is the best thing for the people I serve. Not even so much what is the best thing for me, say financially, whatever it is. And so with that, I've been interacting with people in different circles in different places way more than I normally would. As you know, a natural born introvert, I'd rather just keep to myself and the 3, 4, 5 people that I talk on a regular basis and just keep it moving from there. But really getting into the mode of, no, I have to conversate and speak to people in different circles and see what's happening. And we were in a meeting earlier this week talking about a potential collaboration, and the feedback that we got on just the discovery process and what we initially introduced was so helpful, because it helped us to see an opportunity in the marketplace that can be done right now, and it's super unique and dynamic. And so that was a big wake-up call for me to realize sometimes your best ideas don't come from you or even the people on your team. It comes from people who you are trying to, collaborate with or just build with in general. It's like, oh, but if you're not ready for it, you would automatically become defensive. Say, no, well, what do you mean? No, that's a terrible idea. It's like, no, recognize the value and the opportunity and the feedback that you get, and that wouldn't have happened had I not initiated contact or conversation. So that was a big lesson, man. For those of you listening, just definitely make sure you give yourself opportunity to continue to network and put yourself out there. But more importantly, recognize that there are seasons in business, and what worked last year, 6 months ago may not necessarily be relevant this season that you're in right now.
Are you rebuilding? What are you rebuilding?
I would say so. I would say so. I mean, just as I look at some of the role that I hold within extreme execution and just even my career as a whole, I would say I'm in a rebuild phase, because I am now for the first time not really building for myself. I'm building for the future and getting myself out from the, oh, I just want to be the faceless behind the scenes person that just does the work. So I'm recognizing that at some point the quote unquote 2-man has to become a 1 somehow, right? In some form capacity. So that's the space that I'm in. So I do feel like it's a rebuild, because I've seen the big growth, I've seen the decline, I've seen the questionable phase where you're like, do we retire this thing or what's up?
Right.
And so now, with everything that has been developed, from both skills to actual hard, assets and things of that nature, it feels very much a rebuild, but there's good progress behind it.
So does that go based off more, because one of the things that you said was like, it's like less emotion, because there's now data, where maybe before in the beginning you moved off feelings and maybe what you observed in the market, and there's not necessarily super hard facts, but now you have hard facts based off the experience that you went through?
Yeah, I was going to say it's really less about data and more about experience and maturity, where in the beginning of a career or a business cycle, you are trying to build a business, but deep down, you don't really recognize this. You're really trying to fill some of the voids that you feel internally or some of the insecurities that you have. So you use the business to do that. And the business doesn't fit there. Like the business and your insecurities or whatever lack that you're having, they have no business being in relationship with each other. And so when you become good on your own, you see the business through a completely different lens now. You recognize, oh, these are the mistakes that I was making. I may have tried to do this and position myself or someone else or even a service to be this way when there was no reason for that. So that's been my big realization now, that everything is, I like to say, in its own category. Like family has its own category, self, and all these things. You can go to business and you're not trying to stick those other categories in there. And when you leave the business, you're not trying to take the business with you and be mad at the family for what happened at the business. Right. So that's what I'm seeing. See, I would say definitely between experience and maturity, that's where the sweet spot is.
That's good. Is there based off probably my last question, but based off maybe the conversations that you're having, is there one quote, bar, whatever that has really like hit you a certain kind of way that helps with this rebuild process?
I came across one yesterday, and I just gotta look it up again. And I'll
Hopefully
paraphrase just
words.
so that.
Hopefully it's not the final words.
Yeah,
I apologize.
It was during a research on a project I was working on, but it was something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something to the extent of, if your idea can't be communicated as a process, it's not a good idea. And for me, it resonates because a good idea that doesn't have demand in the marketplace is not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But a good idea that is backed by demand and physical need or tangible need from people in the marketplace, that's a good idea, right? Because it now has a tangible need, or it solves a solution. So yeah, I gotta find the exact quote. I'll do some digging while we chat here and see. But that definitely hit this week.
I like that. Okay, shout out to you.
Appreciate that.
I like rebuilding.
What's up in your world?
I binged on a new docu-series. Have you heard of Big Vape? It's trending on Netflix right now. Okay. So it is the rise and fall of Juul. You know that those little e-cigarettes things that look like, they said it was the iPhone of e-cigs, right? I was watching it. It first off, it's really good for those people who are like on the fence if I should get if I should watch it or not. It's extremely good. I already suggested it to CJ and Jose. Jose's like, yo, this is fire. I think Jose used to vape Juul, so that's why I was like, yo, watch this. The mission, one of the biggest lessons that I got from it was like, the mission doesn't necessarily always translate to like the consumer, right? So their big mission was to eliminate cigarettes, period, right? And in their journey, they've definitely taken a huge role of why cigarettes sales have went down. I think even now, I rarely see people smoke cigarettes. And, you know, there's been a lot like, oh, it smells, yellow teeth, just the ickiness of it. You have to go outside in like the rain when it rains because you can't smoke. Like it's crazy, right? So their target audience is adult smokers. What happened was, as they're marketing, because they're a startup, you have to get yourself out there. They got with one of the people who used to market for Red Bull, right? And what I love about how Red Bull markets their stuff, and he even said it was like allowing your products to be discovered in a cool way. So if you look at Red Bull, you see like all the advertisements on like skateboards, and when somebody skydived, their parachute and their whole like it was just cool ways where people were watching and they just saw Red Bull. So they took that as well as the lifestyle kind of marketing. So in parties, in like showing dancing, just having fun and that whole nine, to where they didn't think fully that this is going to attract to a younger crowd. So if you advertise in a cool way and you advertise in a lifestyle situation, and plus you make it into different flavors, that mango and all these different things, now it goes to you're attracting the kids. And so there was this big situation that not all the kids, a lot of kids were vaping, right? Like people were warning them like, yo, this is going to backfire some way, shape, or form, right? Now, realistically, we can't, I think vaping's only been around for like 10, 15 years the most. And so to figure out, mind you, I'm not a doctor, I'm not stating anything. I'm going based off the documentary. So sitting and saying the life effects of what vape has is not really solid just yet. They're solid on cigarettes, but they're not solid on the actual health risks of vaping. Now, there was this situation where a lot of people were starting to die. And the common situation was, yo, I'm vaping, right? So it was like all these kids kind of having lung issues. And come to find out, that was really THC situations that were going into these devices because you could take off the pod that was killing people. There was a statement they said, because they didn't run that back and say, hey, no, Juul didn't kill these people. It was the THC products. All people were seeing was that it was Juul products being used, and that was the common denominator. So somebody said, and I put this on Threads yesterday, fact checks never goes viral as much as the lie. So they ran with Juul's killing people, right? But when the real facts came out, the real facts didn't go viral as much as Juul is killing people, right? So that part was like, I get it. Now, in their early stages, because they came up with so many different models that wasn't working, they prided themselves of being a tech company. They didn't want to be big tobacco. That's not what they were trying to do. One of the things they were saying is like, smoking isn't about the nicotine delivery. It's about the rituals and preserving them for them, right? So that's what they were trying to do. They weren't trying to be the pushers of nicotine. They were just trying to push the rituals and the fellowship and that whole nine. So they were doing all these different devices that wasn't necessarily working. They came up with one that would put like loose tobacco in it and burn it. Now, they thought that was dope. What they didn't realize is that cannabis people started to take on to that instead of who they originally thought it was, right? And this is where, okay, do I go with who I intended to, or do I move with where it goes? And at the time, they moved to where the audience is. So then they started embracing the different cannabis influencers, and that was paying the bills as they were trying to figure out the right device for the nicotine thing. So even their investors was like, hey, yo, this brings in money. Absolutely. I see what the audience wants, but this is not the mission. This is not the goal. We got to go back to what we intended to do, which was eliminate cigarettes. You've now created a new device in another niche. They kept with it, but they kept trying to build the actual Juul. It's a really dope docu-series. If I gave too much, I apologize. You should have watched it already, okay? You watched it already. I don't know what to tell you. But it's a really good as far as understanding from a business wise, how they scaled. Like they were struggling with scaling. Then it just blew up one time based off the influence of young people always carrying it. And so then they couldn't keep it on the shelves, to then bringing in, like chopping out their original CEO, which was one of the founders, bringing in a yogurt guy who like specialized in chain supplies, right? The supply situation. And just seeing how business works from an idea. It was literally a thesis in college to then being worth billions of dollars, to then reduce it all the way down to like a third of their valuation. It's a really good docuseries.
I remember sometime maybe in the last 2 years, they were saying that they were going to ban e-cigarettes in New York. So I don't know if that
I know they
may have contributed to the fall.
I know they tried to do it in what was it? In San Francisco, I think. One of the sands in California. I don't know if San Diego, San Francisco, but they did do it in San Francisco. And their whole thing was we need to protect the kids. And here's where I found interesting, because they started showing a whole bunch of adults that was like, yo, who's speaking for us? Like, this is literally helping me quit cigarettes. Like, I haven't touched it in 5-10 years. If you ban it, what am I supposed to do? You know, so there goes like your original mission, but you didn't think through who else would be affected. It's such a like, mind you, I could care less about smoking and that whole nine, but it's very interesting to see like those different kind of obstacles of, are you thinking of everything possible if this was to work? Like, who is it going to be in the hands of? Who is it going to affect? What is the mindset of certain people? Like, if this really blows up, what is really the true effects of it? That I was blown away from it. It was a really good docu-series.
Yeah. No, I love things like that because they speak to the validation process, you know, of what you're building and conceptualizing. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
How do you think some of that is, you know, can be avoided from a branding and marketing standpoint? Because, you know, the thing that comes to mind is you come up with an idea, you have a plan for it, you put it in the hands of the marketplace, but the marketplace responds to it a little bit differently. Do you think that can be avoided from a social media and just overall branding standpoint? Or is that small use cases where let's roll out with this group and test and get feedback and then expand? What's your take on that?
So it's hard because branding is what the people think of it, right? We could market it and place it in certain places so to make sure that it's embedded in people's minds a certain kind of way. But it's hard to say that how could that have been avoided if, well, it could have, because they're marketing off top. When they did the big Times Square situation was to grab younger folks dancing around and partying with Juul. They did parties that was full of Juuls, great places to take pictures in order to bring influencers in and have them take pictures with the actual joint, because they're attracting the social media crowd, which in social media crowd is a younger crowd.
Yeah.
So they tried to fix it later on with like the most boringest pictures. Like, it was on a book during a meeting, somebody having coffee. They did like bland coloring, where in the beginning it was super bright coloring. It was orange, it was yellow, it was all over the place, right? So and I understand like their thought process as far as even with the flavors. We know flavors is going to attract younger people. Like, we got mint, we got mango, we got all this, like, but their thought process was, hey, if you're trying to get off cigarettes, and cigarettes really taste nasty. I don't know, I've never had, I only know the smell. But cigarettes taste nasty. I'm not going to give you a menthol e-cig. I'm trying to get you off of cigarettes, meaning I'm trying to give you a whole different experience. So I could understand that particular part. I can understand the sleekness of how because it's a tech world. So how do we make this look sexy, portable, that whole nine? But I think where they went wrong was that they didn't have big tobacco, like as far as on their team earlier. So their big whole thing was they never wanted to work with big tobacco. It was like, we're we are the anti-big tobacco people. They're killing
Right, right.
people, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm very confused because I think nicotine is, I don't know all the bad parts about nicotine, but I got to look that up now. But if they had somebody who they could trust in big tobacco, they would understand how to market it correctly. So what big tobacco did was exactly what Juul did in the beginning. They did advertisement of younger people partying that made it look acceptable. That's exactly what big tobacco did in the beginning. They just made it look more modern. And so if they had somebody who they could trust in big tobacco that is now turned to, I want to get rid of cigarettes just like you, then they would know the gaps and the falls of big tobacco to avoid and say, hey, this is just a better solution. This is what we could do. But they went with the let's try to hit the masses. Let's try to go and their original reason of lowering down cigarette sales and making it super popular. Cool. They dominated the e-cig situation. It was Juul majority of the time. They made billions of dollars. They dominated that. But getting into such a risky market, such as something that can affect health, I don't know how you can really avoid some of the things when kids are kids. What do you think?
Yeah. It's a strategy that really is not utilized enough. And there's only one other brand that I've seen do that but the strategy I'm referring to is collaborating with your biggest competitor early so that you can neutralize their position against you. Mm-hmm. So the only person who I've seen do this recently, who's been on Front Street about it, is Dwayne Johnson and the XFL brand. So if you noticed, when we covered them on the podcast actually a couple of months ago, where when they were launching the brand, they made it clear that they don't want to compete against the NFL. They want to work with them.
Right.
And so sure enough, after their first successful season, they found a way to integrate. So I thought that was a good move because you're going to your biggest competitor and you're saying, hey, I know that you can crush me. You have all this experience, you have all these resources on me. So I don't think it's smart to try and compete against you, although you are my competitor. Let's not overlook the fact of the situation. But it's a strategic business move to go to your biggest competitor and find ways to collaborate so you can at least give yourself time in the market to really mature, grow, know what the response is, and make your moves from there. So yeah, that's the part that stuck out from what you said there, that they didn't want anything to do with big tobacco, where maybe if they would have looked for a way to create a mutual relationship, it could have been beneficial to them. Who knows?
They did at the end when it was kind of like too late, but the collaboration, the way they kind of stated it, was more of showing that big tobacco lost. This is where sales were already declining really bad. And so they were like, you know what? Let's just work with you. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
We lost. We lost. So here, we're going to give you these billions and we're going to give you these resources that you may not have because we lost. So we might as well just stay relevant by working with you. So that
They're
maybe
probably looking for an acquisition, maybe.
So maybe that's more of what they honestly want, because I believe they got an early investment from big tobacco. Not what everybody, like, I think it was like an overseas big tobacco or something. And people in the company were like, do we want to do this? Well, this is where the money's coming in. So still you could give me another, and that's another thing. Like, how mission driven are you that you will not take money from the actual competitor that you're trying to defeat? That's That's something I know you would be like, nope.
Yeah. Well, the new me understands, again, this concept of the phases of a business, where if it gets you to the end goal, you want to find a balance to it, not just a strong no. And I also think it depends on the company. It depends on the category of a company. So there's a lot of variabilities now. I really try to not operate in just absolute extremes outside of just the crazy, immoral things. But in a business standpoint, I really push myself to be as open-minded as possible until there's just no other way but, that. So I'm growing a little bit. I'm growing.
Shout out to you and growing. Yeah, people watch it. I think it's like 3 episodes or something like that effect. 3 or 4 episodes. Really, really good. Go check out Big Vape. I think it's called The Rise and the Fall of Jewel or something to that effect. But I know it's called Big Vape and it's trending on Netflix as I'm speaking. It may not trend when you're listening to it, but it was trending when I was. So, let's go to the creator of the week. And when I tell you these two are relationship goals from such a funny and humor way. It's an overseas couple. Meet the Forbes. I don't know if Moose. Well, I'll ask Moose after. But the joy that I get after watching any of their videos, their accent, their comebacks to each other. Yeah, just listen or watch one.
I've just got home for Adrian to tell me that he has just paid £10 a month because the person at our door was so charming. What's it for? What charity is it for, Adrian?
Something to do with like...
Speak of your chest.
Something to do with like ambulance. They want more ambulances on the road. So in a community like this, 60,000 people a month die from cardiac arrest. Look, he was just charming me.
No, Adrian, I called you today and I said, can I have some money to do some food shopping? I said, all right, cool. Did you eat the steak? Did you eat my steak in the fridge? That's what I said to you. You said, I'm itching it right now. I called you and I said, Adrian, can I get £10 to do the shopping? You said, £10? What am I giving you £10 for? There's cod in the fridge. I don't want cod. You ate my steak. So now you're telling me, as I walk in the house, Mr. Man, I talk with my chest, that you have just given a door knocker £10 a month for an ambulance service that you don't even know what it's called. I'm your charity. Tara is your charity. You can't tell me nothing no more. Because all I'm saying is speak with your chest. I ask you for £10, you can't give me £10. Bro, you don't respect me enough. You don't respect yourself. Speak with bass. I only gave him. Are you my son? Did I birth you?
I was intimidated, yeah.
Adrian, he was about 4'2". You're 5'11". He's 4'2". Little old Betty over there could say no, but you couldn't. I'm your charity. I'm your charity.
I absolutely love them. Wish I could play more. Maybe Isaiah will play one more. I don't know. Go check out the video experience if you're not part of the video experience. But
what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Sorry, I'm trying to sleep. Move.
they're dope. It's refreshing. They make me want to watch Top Boy. It's great. It's great. So shout out to them. Moose, do you know?
I haven't, man. I haven't come across their stuff, but yeah, I haven't come across their stuff, but that's hilarious. I love that. That's so dope.
Yeah, no, they're dope. So shout out to them. Now, let's go to our how-to section, and this is one of course, the most requested information since we're podcasts. So people are like, well, talk to us about podcasting. How do you grow a podcast? How do you start a podcast? This one, we're going to go find the best tips from the top entrepreneurs of how to start and grow a podcast. And so the first one, we got to go to the family EYL as far as how to address your podcast.
Biggest advice that Dame Dash ever gave me, shout out to Dame, he said, stop calling your show a podcast. That was 2 years ago. We stopped calling it, him and my people at 85 South, we started calling it a show, but now it's not even a show. Earn Your Leisure is just a brand, it's a media company. Our vision was always bigger than just a podcast.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like what we have to offer is so much bigger than just that.
What he's really speaking to is the relentless pursuit of the next thing, right? Like we started with a show and it turned into a network and turned into a media platform, but it's now turned into a global source for information, right?
Yeah, I like what Troy says there too. The ever going evolution of what happens to the next thing, right? And I love that breakdown. But it's very important. And again, shout out to Jabari, who was on an episode with us a couple of weeks ago or a couple episodes ago, when he talked about it's really important that when you're first starting to understand how you're categorizing the brand, the company, the business that you're trying to build, because how you categorize it ultimately determines how big it can grow. So if you have aspirations to do however many dollars in business or however much impact or reach that you want to have on a global scale, but you put yourself in the corner of a marketplace that has a ceiling that will never allow you to get there, sometimes it's not so much your idea, your business, or even the talent that you have. It's just the position of the market that you've cornered yourself into. So I really have to add big emphasis to say, or to this one and say, you have to study the space before you get in. Please be mindful not to just look at influential people or be inspired by someone who's convincing and compelling and jump into the space and say, I want to do what they do, because you don't know how they strategically put themselves in place to serve that corner of the market, and if that will align with your interest and skill set as well. So yeah, super important how you categorize yourself, what position you put yourself into. That's very important. Now, the last thing is just know that it's normal to graduate from grade 1 to grade 2, which is what they talk about, that natural progression. As you gain experience, you say, okay, that was good, but I feel we can be better, bigger, etc. So that is also part of the process.
I like that. Second tip comes from one of the godfathers of podcasting from an entrepreneur side, which is Pat Flynn. He talks about how many ideas you should have up front.
And try to come up with 25 episodes. Like, just, that you don't have to nail the title or anything. Just what might you talk about when you start hitting record? And if you can get 25, then okay, you're pretty good, because you might have like a half year's worth of content if you're going weekly that you could kind of keep going with, versus what I know a lot of people do is they just jump into it and they're 2 episodes in and they're like, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about next week. So planning ahead, getting used to kind of having a little bit of an editorial calendar. And where do those come from? They should just come from either your expertise and knowledge about the topic and things that you feel like would be useful to share, but even more importantly, they can be answers to people's questions or topics that are hot within the space that you're in right now.
So with this one, I think with technology, it makes it a lot easier to come up with these different episodes, right? So where you kind of want to already have 3 episodes in the clip as far as when you post it, right? One, that's reasons for people to kind of get a understanding of who you are and what the podcast is about. But also 2, kind of gives you up front of like, what is the topics I have to come up with? And so with things like ChatGPT, with Google Bard, with Claude 2, you can now go into AI and be like, I'm creating a podcast about streetwear. I'm creating a podcast about streetwear. Please give me 25 episode ideas going towards the audience of, and then drop who your audience is. As much details as you can give about your podcast, you're going to want to do that, because the pressure of coming up with something every single week is real. We deal with it every single week, right? Where it's like, okay, what are we going to talk about this time when we do our lives? What's the topic that we're going to talk about now? What's great after you do a good amount is that there's going to be data that's going to support the new topics that you come up with, right? In the beginning, you have to be like, all right, what can I talk about? Later down the line, you can then almost lean on data based off what your audience has reacted to on some, hey, you should go deeper down on these particular topics, right? So I do agree with Pat Flynn as far as coming up with 25 ideas, just so you can pretty much have, let's say, I would say 30, just so you can have a month's worth as far as content, but then you have a good amount each week. Let's say you do once a week, and then use tools like ChatGPT, Claude 2, Google Bard. Now we have Meta AI. Use these things to help you create the podcast episodes so you don't ever have to worry about running out of things to say. Okay. So the third tip comes from, of course, Gary Vee, and talking about, should you get big time guests off top or something else?
Be strategic about who you book as guests. A lot of people try to come out the gate and get their biggest guest, when the right answer is get 10 guests first in that are not as big, giving yourself time to get good at interviewing, and then you start layering the bigger guests you can get. I'm way better at hosting a podcast today than I was the first 100 I did, because you just get reps. You get to understand. I like struggled cutting people off. I still do it. You have no idea that if you're gonna be good at it or good by your standard.
This may be the 10th time I've said this in the last couple of months, but again, more evidence that you need to get the bad reps out of you in the beginning. As you start, there is gradual growth that's naturally going to happen, and allow yourself time to do that or build that into your process. So I love that he's mentioning this, and I too have to agree that you don't have to go to your top of the top right away unless you're seasoned in the space. Now, granted, if you already have experience, if you have over a couple of hundred or even 1,000 hours of practice time on camera, which again, I can speak to that because I believe we've probably surpassed that amount now with everything we do on live and on the podcast. So there's a ton of experience on camera that you have. Go back and just look at, I can speak for myself at least, go back and watch how I've transitioned and become more comfortable on camera as the episodes have gone on. So where I would start, or who I would start with if I were starting over today, would be completely different than how I would start when we first started here, in terms of bringing on new guests, not so much a co-host, standpoint. Right. But that shows to you that as you get better, you want to position yourself for the biggest guests to really make the biggest impact. So I do agree with that big time. Very important.
The fourth one, I think we're up to fourth. The fourth one has everything to do with discoverability.
So how many people in here have a podcast, right? Like audio podcasts, hard to grow, right? Podcasts don't grow because the reason why podcasts don't grow, no matter what you do, is because ultimately what happens is there's no virality built into it. Let's say that I release an audio podcast, Eric listens to it. Only way anyone else is finding out about this podcast is if Eric loves me so much and likes the episode so much that he takes it and he DMs it to someone, texts it, he tweets it, he does something with it. But on YouTube, if you just watch the full video, YouTube's like, yo, Eric, like that. Send it to more people like Eric, and they just send it. There's a key piece to all this content stuff. Yes, eventually you have to be on multiple platforms. People are going to keep going to the platforms where virality built into it rather than trying to build from scratch. And so I think that the way that these platforms are built too, you really got to pay attention to, because that'll ultimately drive growth.
So with this one, it's so important because he's right. As much as, and this is going to be especially for my introverts, as much as long form content, period, is highly recommended. And you can get discovered if people Google certain keywords or your title and your podcast does show up, that is searchable content, right? But it's way harder from an audio standpoint. If you look at social media, audio isn't necessarily shared. Video is shared, right? When we're looking at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, they aren't sharing different clips or different podcasts that you should listen to. They have those curated playlists, of course, but it is so hard to get discovered from an audio standpoint. So you have to resort into the video podcast way, right? And to clip it up. Now, with that, of course, there are different tools to help you clip down your podcast videos, right? We have Opus Clip, we have Get Munch, we have Video AI. There's this app called Captions that actually can chop down not only some of your videos, but also add amazing captions to it. So there's several ways to take your long form videos and make them into those short viral clips. But we can't just rely on the audio only to do that. So something that's been working very well with us lately is YouTube Shorts as well as Instagram carousels, right? So on Instagram, we used to go real heavy on reels, and to a certain point we do. But right now, we're making a shift on some of these carousels where the first slide tells you what it's about. Then we give you, let's say in this instance, we're talking about the audio discovery. So we'll say the guy who said that, I didn't even get his name. I got to find his name. Guy who said that, then maybe something that I would say based off that. So it kind of builds a story and people are starting to understand what the podcast is and they'll go listen to the full episode. Also understanding that YouTube is a whole search engine in itself. So just like how he said, hey, if somebody is watching it, they're going to recommend it to other people who are watching it. So hitting it in different platforms, not just audio, but we're talking about YouTube and taking advantage of the long form and the short form. We're talking about TikToks. We're talking about Instagram. We're talking about Facebook. And clearly looking at what you can maintain on a consistent basis and doing maybe one or two of those things, getting a social media scheduler like Later, like Buffer, like using Business Studio on Meta that could help you schedule out some of these things so you could concentrate on the real things. But do not do audio only unless you have a strong following and they will go find your audio based off your influence. That made sense?
100%.
Made sense. And then the last one comes from our family at Think Media, talking about should you go more in depth about certain things? Should you keep it short? Should you get personal on your podcast?
Get personal. I mean, think about this. So if someone is going to click on your podcast, they're probably listening to it in the car, on the way to work, at the gym, while they're doing the dishes. It's you and the listener. So use the podcast as an opportunity to get more personal, to go deeper in the conversation. What I love so much about podcasting is that it can be long form content. It can be a secondary thing that someone is doing and taking in your information. So use your podcast to go deeper.
That's so good. That's so good. It takes a while, right? It takes a while, and I'm saying for someone to just grow comfortable with being vulnerable and share more about what you personally have experienced as it relates to the topic at hand. Because I mean, think about it. You guys who are listening to this or watching this right now, you can very easily go and look up how to start a podcast, best practices for podcasting. You can do that on your own. The content that we're getting is searchable content, things that you can find online. But what makes it unique is that you're getting that content with our experience and our thoughts attached to it. And so Imagine if we were to give you that content, and I believe there are times throughout the history of the show where, again, just as we've discovered that for ourselves, where it probably was that, and then we realized, no, we have to give them our thoughts, our spin to it, not just regurgitate what has been said on the clip or the information that we're sharing, right? And so, but what does that take? That takes a little bit of vulnerability. That takes a little bit of eagerness and willingness to open up and share what you experience. And so you can see even the format of the show now, it's strategically positioned where you're getting more of us from, hey, what's going on this week and what did we intentionally learn and can share so that listeners and people watching can benefit and maybe apply and get similar outcomes to what we're experiencing. So everything from that is very important and very key. But for those of you listening, looking to get into the space, make sure that you're infusing those parts of yourselves into the show. The part that I liked, and it's nice to think about this way, and probably I have to almost meditate on this a little bit more, is be mindful that your content is almost a conversation that is being had in a very intimate space with you and the listener. All right. It's like, when you think about it that way, it's like, oh, shoot, you're right. If someone's watching this, just listening to the content, you think about delivering that to them differently than if you were at a large event and you're presenting to an audience. There's a totally different feel. So I have to, be right back. I got to meditate on that.
Hey.
That's good.
So I also want to review, Moose found a really dope podcast report. I want to kind of talk about that, kind of help the listeners and viewers in their podcast journey.
Yeah. So this was a report that just came out recently. It was done by SXM Media, and it looks like they're either backed or in collaboration with SiriusXM, which makes sense, I guess, right? SiriusXM, SXM. Yeah, sure enough, it is SiriusXM. So they have a podcast network, and clearly they are using this as their free tool to be able to get more podcasts on their network. So maybe it's something that we will have to check out. But I love what they did with this report. Fire graphics, by the way. Whoever designed this is really cool. I'm going to send it to you for you to check it out.
Okay.
But they basically broke down podcasting and they gave stats around listeners who are tuning in to different types of shows. And not only are they just telling you, hey, this is the, let's say, the comedy section or the lifestyle section, but they zero in on the different profiles of listeners. So they have a section after they tell you the category of a podcast, they tell you about the listener profile. So for example, the 3 types of listeners who tune into comedy, there's the humorist, the entertainer, and the class clown, right? So you can really think about, if you know this about your prospective listener already, you have more insight to who's listening, what type of content you need to create for them so that they can be most engaged with what you're putting out. Now, the final piece of this, which I think is super cool, is that they close off each section with a category or with a slide specific to brand opportunity. So they're telling you, here's the opportunity for you if you fit this category. Here's the opportunity for you to do something, or here's the opportunity for you, what you can do in the space. Right, so it says a huge percentage, 94% of comedy listeners take action after hearing a podcast ad. Yes, that's very close to everybody who listens. So if I'm a podcast who categorizes as a comedy podcast, you might want to take this information, right? Whether you cite it in your deck or you do something with it, but you should be going after advertisers pretty heavily and showing them this, like, hey, people are most receptive to and are most willing to take action to ads when the content that is, before it is comedy related content. So that's great information. So a lot of really good insight around the average age of a listener, gender, status, level of education, ethnicity, so much great content here. And then of course they have multiple categories, right? They have, news, I saw lifestyle and entertainment, health and wellness. So really, really cool. Definitely you guys should check it out just to learn about the different listener profiles and how you can deliver your content in a way that would better resonate with them.
I got one more question for you. One more question.
Yeah.
What is something that you learned this year when it comes to podcasting, the prepping, the delivering, however you want to go about it, that maybe you didn't do last year?
Yeah. Podcasting has actually made me a much better communicator because as I listen to myself a lot in the clips that are posted on the show, the page, or the show's page on Instagram, YouTube, anywhere, I've caught on to how many times I use filler words similar to kinda, like, very passive, not authoritative words. And so it's very subtle, but if you're a listener and the expert you're listening to is saying things like kinda, maybe, they sound unsure of what they're talking about, you're not going to really see this person as an expert or an authoritative figure in the space, even if they have the utmost experience. I mean, we're two people who are doing the work on a daily basis. We've been doing it for going on 5 or 7 years now. So it's been quite a long time. And so I have to say podcasting has made me a much better communicator. And the second thing, I've realized how to say more in less time. So rather than just going on a long tangent, that could be good, right? You might be very passionate about a topic and I can sit here and talk about it for 5, 10 minutes at a time. But I think about the listener experience and say, man, when one voice is speaking on a 2-person podcast for an extended period of time, that's much easier for someone to check out because there's no change in tonality. Mm-hmm. Where if I learn to communicate what I have to say in a short amount of time, now we play that tennis match where I say something, I hit it back to you, you respond, I take what you say, right? And it's conversational where, shout out to, and I know you made fun of me for this, but the AirPod spatial audio feature where you can feel the audio. Like, so for example, if I'm listening to something and I look this way, the audio will shift and go to the right side more. Super dope. So I guess that would happen. I wonder, I gotta speak to Eddie about that because I was thinking, imagine that would happen with a podcast. So
I think they do have
I'm
that.
Positioned
I remember when
higher.
we went to that podcast convention. They were talking about a little bit about the spatial audio for some of those episodes that have more storytelling. Like, I do believe they have that. It's all in the
it's really
mic.
cool, right? It's like an immersive experience. Yeah. Because I was saying, like, if I'm on the right side of the screen, yeah. So yeah, man, that's been one of my biggest lessons is just being a better communicator and taking a more authoritative stance in the space, delivering the information in a more compact way for listeners to receive. I think I've gotten much, much better in the last 2 months. I wouldn't say it's the entire year that I've been doing this, but really the last 2 months I paid close attention to how I deliver and communicate and make the connection to the points. Because before I might talk about water and connect water to airplanes. It's like, wait, what? Why are you telling me about airplanes when we're talking about water? Right. But if I connect water to going to the beach or drinking a sip of water after a long day of exercise or a long workout, whatever, right? It's like, okay, there's more context here. So yeah, I know it's an unrelated example, but context is important and connecting it to something tangible for the listeners.
I like that. I think for me, that one that they said to get personal, I think that one has been something I've been really intentionally trying to add more to the podcast as far as saying, hey, this is what I did. This is what I've used. This is, I don't want to go more towards always teaching where there's no, I'm thinking about those people who are just coming in to like, well, how do you know this? Like, who are you? Like, we're still in the growth stage of our podcast. So for me to just go, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. This is what you should do. And they don't know us. I know if I heard something, I'm like, who are you? Like, unless somebody referred me, if I'm discovering you on these platforms, I gotta know, like, are you going through this? Or have you gone through it? That whole nine. So I'm always, when it's about the getting personal and getting more in depth about certain things, I'm trying to be like, okay, how do I always make sure the audience knows that I'm going through this? I'm trying to build this. I'm, those kind of things, and being more personal with it than being perfect. I could care less. And on a long form situation, I could care less about being perfect. Any content, I care less about being perfect and always looking like I have it together, because I don't. And I don't try to be. And I don't try to act like I know everything. I know a good amount based off my experience, but I'm still learning, even on this podcast, what some of the things to do. And so the podcast is just a journey of the learning experience, and that we just love that you guys are taking it with us. So that's one of the things.
That's a good word. Yeah, that's a good word. True.
So, but let's get into the question of the week.
Big vibes.
But of course, this segment is sponsored by flightassessment.com, where you discover your personal superpowers and learn how to use your superpowers to become a master communicator, strengthen all your relationships, and develop the self-awareness you need to fulfill your highest potential. Go to flightassessment.com, and Moose actually has the question of the week.
Yeah, so this question comes from a gentleman by the name of Yusuf, and he asked and said, which group has more work-life balance? One who has a 9-to-5 or an entrepreneur? What's your take on that? What you got for this one? Who has more work-life balance?
I think, y'all be asking these questions that I'd be so torn off of. Stressful. I think it depends on the person. You mean? Like, I think if you look at the totality of it, I think obviously people would think entrepreneurs do. But if they don't know how to time manage, they don't. If they don't have their priorities right, they don't. I wouldn't say majority, but I would say a lot of entrepreneurs do struggle with those things, that it could look like the 9-to-5 actually. If you ask an entrepreneur, a 9-to-5 has the better life, the work-life balance, because you clock in, clock out, right? At a specific time. And then that after the clock out, the rest is personal. Now, of course, there is a select few, there is a certain percentage that is, once they clock out, they start working on their business and their brand that they are growing in hopes to replace the 9-to-5. So their work-life balance may be a little uneven at the time. A 9-to-5 has a clock in, a clock out, where entrepreneur, depending on who the entrepreneur is, they don't have a clock in, they don't have a clock out. There is a clock in and a little bit of family.
It's an open clock.
Clock in.
It's an open clock.
I'll take a break. Yeah. It's a clock in and breaks. It's not clock out. Entrepreneurs don't necessarily clock out. Now, we've heard with in past episodes with like Eminem, where literally he treats his raps, his music career, which we've known as music artists that can go in super late at night and stay up all night. And that's their situation, where Eminem is like, at 5, I'm out. That's it. No more. I think for me, my answer would be, if a disciplined entrepreneur we're talking about, then yes, I would say an entrepreneur. If we are talking about majority of the masses, I would say the typical 9-to-5 who does not have a brand, does not have a business, which is none of y'all who are listening to this, because y'all either going to start or you already have one. But the typical 9-to-5 who just works that job is the one that has the work-life balance. What do you think?
And what's interesting is I have a buddy of mine who is at a full-time career right now, or a 9-to-5, and his viewpoint is, the entrepreneur has way more work-life balance. And I get it, right? Because there's way more flexibility that's available to the entrepreneur, meaning you don't have to commute for the most part, unless you have an office or whatnot that you're commuting to, but you don't have to commute. You don't have to really stay there the full 9 to 5. You're not commissioned to or have to be plugged in during that time, right? You can maybe work a little bit later in the day or earlier in the day. You can work some things around to give yourself the flexibility that you need. And I think that offers difference. So what I realize is it's not so much better balance that's available to the entrepreneur. It's more flexibility that, if done correctly, it can provide better options. But I have to agree with what you said. The one thing that we cannot discount that a 9 to 5 offers is that once you're done, you're done.
You're done.
You can check out. You can stay a little late. You could whatever you want. You can work overtime. Cool. I respect it. But there's no feeling, I haven't had this feeling in a really long time, where you check out and you're out. Like Friday, I remember when I worked right after college at the company that I was a part of, when I left Friday at whatever it was, 5:30, 6:30, I did not think about work again until Sunday night. That was a tremendous relief. You're like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm not doing that. I don't care about work. But you can't do that as an entrepreneur. Everything is interconnected in the entrepreneur world. So I think, you really got to pick your poison with this one, because do you want to be online at all times where you're looking for things to learn and get ideas from and create and connect to that could help your business, and you're pretty much open for business at all times of the day? I mean, think about it. As much as we joke and we say, hey, we're learning from Netflix or doing this, at the end of the day, you're watching and your mind can't help but connect to, oh, this can be useful for X, Y, Z. So you don't even enjoy your movies the way you once did when you enter that realm of, okay, I'm open for business, or I'm in business for myself as an entrepreneur. So it's a different experience, without a doubt.
That's a fact. But let us know what you think in the comments. If you're listening to the audio, head over to Threads, head over to YouTube. Let us know what you think. Who has the better work-life balance? 9 to 5s or entrepreneurs? Would love to hear what you have to say about that. And then, of course, the after show every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts. Go check that out. We either have business therapy or content therapy. One of the two. You got to check it out. It's really, really dope. Follow us on all social media platforms at Nicky and Moose. That's Nicky, people. Thank you. And Moose is Moose. I don't think you can mess up the spelling on that one, to be honest with you. But Moose, final words.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this back, man. I'm going to go back to one that I've shared on here multiple times, but it's so important because I see it damaging relationships time and time again. And I have a saying that says, overly communicated expectations eliminate disappointment. So if your relationships are on the rocks time and time again, just know that if you can be clear about the standard and the expectation of what you want to get out of it, it's going to help to tremendously decrease the chances of you guys ending up in a bad situation. And that's both personal and business. So there it is.